Are you worried about your baby's development? It's a question that resonates with many, and understandably so. Babies are bundles of joy and mystery, growing and changing at their own unique pace. As they blossom, it's natural to wonder if they're on track. Every hiccup, every coo, every roll, and every crawl matters. It's a fascinating journey filled with milestones that mark their growth. But what if your little one isn't hitting those milestones just yet? It's important to remember that every baby is different. Some might start crawling at 6 months, others might take a bit longer. It's all part of their individual journey. However, it's equally crucial to be aware of signs that may hint at potential developmental issues. These signs don't necessarily mean there's a problem, but they're worth noting and discussing with a healthcare professional. So, are you ready to learn more about these signs? Let's dive into the first sign you should be aware of. The first sign is delayed milestones. Each baby's journey is unique, but there are common markers along the way that we expect most babies to reach. These milestones include rolling over, sitting up, crawling, and walking. Many babies will reach these stages at their own pace, and it's perfectly normal for there to be some variation in timing. However, if your baby seems significantly behind in achieving these milestones compared to peers, it might be worth paying attention to. Babies who are substantially delayed in reaching these stages could benefit from a little extra help. It's not about rushing them, but about ensuring they're given every opportunity to thrive. So, if your little one isn't rolling over when most babies usually do, or if they're not yet crawling or walking when you'd expect, don't panic, but do consider discussing it with a healthcare professional. Remember, it's okay if your baby is a little behind, but significant delays should be discussed with a professional. The second sign is lack of eye contact. Now, eye contact is more than just a polite habit. It's a fundamental part of human communication and connection. When babies lock eyes with their caregivers, it's not just a magic moment. It's also an important milestone in their social development. Eye contact helps babies learn to recognize familiar faces, understand emotions, and develop empathy. It's also a crucial step in building their language skills. When a baby looks at you while you're talking, they're not just watching your face. They're picking up on subtle cues about speech and language. But what if your baby isn't making eye contact? Don't panic. Some babies take a little longer to start making eye contact. However, limited or no eye contact could hint at challenges such as autism spectrum disorders or other developmental issues. Remember, early intervention can make a world of difference. Eye contact is an important social skill, so it's worth keeping an eye on. The third sign is limited social interaction. Babies are naturally drawn to human faces and voices. They love to engage with us. This social development is crucial as it forms the building blocks for future communication and relationships. It's during these early interactions that babies learn to respond to smiles, engage with caregivers, and show interest in others. Now, it's important to remember that every baby is different, and some may simply be more reserved than others. However, if you notice your little one isn't showing much interest in people or doesn't seem to respond to your smiles or coos, it might be worth paying attention to. This isn't about creating worry, but about being observant and recognizing potential signs. Limited social interaction could be a sign of various developmental issues, and it's always better to address these sooner rather than later. Remember, early intervention can make a world of difference. Babies are naturally social, so limited interaction should be addressed. The fourth sign is speech and language delays. Every baby is unique and has their own pace of development. However, there's a typical progression we expect to see when it comes to speech and language. It starts with cooing around 2 to 3 months, followed by babbling between 4 to 6 months. By their first birthday, most babies can say at least one word, and by 2 years, they should be combining 2 words together. If you notice your little one isn't cooing, babbling, or starting to form words by these ages, it could be a red flag. It's important not to panic, though. Some children are just late bloomers, but it's still a good idea to talk to a pediatrician or a speech-language pathologist. They can help determine whether there's a delay or if your child is just taking their own sweet time. Language development is crucial, so delays in this area should be taken seriously. The fifth sign is feeding difficulties. Now, feeding time is a crucial part of a baby's day. It's not just about nutrition, but also about bonding and developing social skills. But sometimes it can be a struggle. Trouble swallowing, excessive gagging, or outright refusal to eat are common feeding difficulties that you might encounter. While it's normal for babies to be a bit fussy during mealtimes, Persistent feeding issues are something that should be addressed promptly. It could be a sign of sensory issues, problems with coordination, or even gastrointestinal conditions. Remember, every baby is unique and what works for one may not work for another. So if you're facing feeding difficulties, don't stress. Seek guidance from a pediatrician or a feeding specialist. They can provide strategies and techniques to help ease the feeding process for both you and your baby. Feeding shouldn't be a struggle, so any feeding difficulties should be checked out. The sixth sign is persistent fussiness or irritability. We all know babies can have their moments of fussiness, it's part of the deal, right? But when we talk about persistent and excessive fussiness or irritability, it's a whole different ballgame. It's like a baby's version of a red flag, waving high and bright. Now don't panic, it's not about the occasional tantrum or a grumpy afternoon, it's about a sustained pattern of fussiness, crying, or irritability that seems to go beyond the usual. This could indicate underlying issues like colic, a common condition among infants causing discomfort and crying, or even gastrointestinal problems. Of course, it's important not to jump to conclusions. Babies have their off days just like we do. But if you notice your little one is consistently more fussy or irritable than what seems typical, it might be worth mentioning to a healthcare professional. After all, it's better to be safe than sorry. Babies cry, but excessive fussiness could be a sign of something more. The seventh sign is limited fine and gross motor skills. Fine and gross motor skills are fundamental to a baby's development. Fine motor skills involve the use of small muscles, like those in the fingers and hands, used for activities like reaching and grasping. Gross motor skills, on the other hand, involve the larger muscles of the body that enable actions like sitting, crawling, and walking. Now, it's important to remember that every baby develops at their own pace, and minor variations in reaching these milestones are completely normal. However, if you notice significant delays or difficulties, it might be a cause for concern. For instance, if your baby is struggling with tasks like holding their head up, reaching for objects, or making coordinated movements, it may be time to seek some guidance. Motor skills are key to a baby's development, so any difficulties in this area should be evaluated. The eighth sign is regression. Now, this is a term that describes a situation where a baby who has already mastered certain skills suddenly stops performing them. It's like taking a step backwards in their developmental journey. For instance, if a baby who's been babbling away for a good few weeks suddenly falls silent, or if they've been playing peekaboo with you but then lose interest, these could be examples of regression. It could also be physical, such as a baby who's been sitting up unaided, suddenly struggling to do so. It's important to remember that all babies have off days, just like us. But if these changes persist, it could be a sign of developmental regression. This is because mastering these skills is part of a baby's natural progression, and losing them can be a cause for concern. Regression can be concerning, so any sudden loss of skills should be addressed. Don't hesitate to reach out to a healthcare professional if you notice such changes. They are there to provide guidance and support. The ninth sign is unusual behavior or sensory sensitivities. This particular sign pertains to behaviors that may seem peculiar or out of the ordinary. For instance, some babies might demonstrate excessive hand flapping, or they could show intense reactions to certain sensory experiences like loud noises or bright lights. These behaviors might seem harmless or quirky at first glance. However, it's important to know that they could be indicative of developmental disorders. The world is a symphony of sensory experiences for babies, and they are learning to navigate it. But if your child is showing heightened sensitivities or unusual behaviors, it could be their unique way of processing sensory information. It's not something that should alarm you immediately, but it's certainly something that merits attention. Remember, it's always better to err on the side of caution. If you notice your little one demonstrating these behaviors, do reach out to a healthcare professional for advice. Unusual behavior is worth noting, so any such sign should be evaluated. The 10th sign is lack of responsiveness to name. When a baby hears their name, it's not just the sound that grabs their attention, but the recognition that they're being addressed. It's a basic form of communication, a cornerstone for social interaction. It's an early milestone that typically emerges around the time a baby is 7 months old. But what if your baby consistently fails to respond to their name? Well, it's important to remember that every child develops at their own pace. Some may just need a little more time. That said, consistent lack of responsiveness to their name, especially past the age of 1, could be a red flag. It may indicate difficulties with hearing, attention, or even social engagement. It's not something to panic about, but it's definitely worth mentioning to your child's pediatrician or a developmental specialist. Responding to their name is a milestone, so failure to do so should be discussed with a professional. These are some of the signs you should be aware of, from delayed milestones and lack of eye contact to limited social interaction and speech and language delays. We've also covered feeding difficulties, persistent fussiness, limited motor skills, regression, unusual behaviors, and lack of responsiveness to their name. These signs might be indications that your baby could benefit from some extra support or intervention. However, it's vital to remember that each baby is unique and they all develop at their own pace. Variations in development timing are normal, but if you notice a significant delay or if your instincts tell you something might be amiss, it's crucial to seek advice from a healthcare professional. Professionals can provide guidance, reassurance, and, when necessary, early intervention services that can make a significant difference in your baby's life. Remember, every baby is unique and develops at their own pace. Trust your instincts and don't hesitate to seek professional advice if you have concerns.